Joe Biden recently referred to MAGA Republicans as semi-fascists. But is that accurate? Is that true? Well, I'm going to tell you something right now. Fascists are taking over in the United States. Are you surprised? You shouldn't be. People on the left have been warning us for years that fascism is taking hold in America, that the fascists in government are trying to take control of our lives, restrict our freedoms, to come for our rights. Well, I hate to admit it, but the left were right. Of course, what they didn't tell us, what they didn't tell any of us, was that the fascist threat was actually coming from the Democrats the whole time. This is JP with Political Pop Culture, and this is my take. Irony. A simple definition for the word irony would be a situation in which there's a contrast between expectation and reality. An example of irony would be Democrats, including prominent Democrats like AOC, referring to Donald Trump for the last 6 years ad nauseum as a fascist. Now, the reason this is ironic is because not only is Donald Trump not a fascist, but their own party leader, Joe Biden, is behaving and has been behaving for years as a fascist. Just weeks before the 2020 presidential election, the New York Post broke a story that then presidential candidate Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, while Joe Biden was serving as vice president under Barack Obama, was illegally peddling influence and brokering deals in Ukraine and China. Now, while Biden the elder has denied any knowledge of his son's business dealings, text messages between Joe and Hunter show that Joe Biden was, in fact, aware of Hunter's illegal deal-making. Hunter Biden's laptop contained emails which were published by the New York Post just weeks ahead of the 2020 presidential election. The problem is they were widely dismissed by news media outlets and by now President Joe Biden, declaring it Russian disinformation and a hoax. What's not a hoax is how important your interaction is with this channel. Hit the like button, then click on subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way, you're going to be the first to know when we drop new content just like this. That little bit of support from you really does go a long way to helping the channel, so thank you. In September 2021, Biden Press Secretary Jen Psaki stuck to the Russian disinformation story after Hunter Biden's laptop data was confirmed. I think it's broadly known and widely known that there was a broad range of Russian disinformation back in 2020, Psaki said. Now, for his part, Hunter Biden, who had no experience in the gas or oil industries and had no experience to justify his position, he was sitting on the board of Burisma Holdings, the largest gas company in Ukraine. When Ukrainian prosecutor Viktor Shokin began investigating Burisma and investigating Hunter Biden, then Vice President Joe Biden stepped in. What did he do? Vice President Joe Biden threatened to withhold $1 billion in aid to the Ukraine if Shokin wasn't fired from his position as prosecutor. Well, guess what? Shokin was, in fact, fired. Now, folks, fascism is a system of government where opponents and critics are attacked and silenced. Fascism is promoting the nation over the individual. Fascism is using the power of the government to go after those who would oppose you. Does that sound familiar? Well, it should, because that's precisely what the Democrats have been doing, and it's the playbook that the Democrats have been using for years. The Department of Justice, the FBI, the IRS, these federal agencies have all demonstrated how politicized and compromised they've become. And they've only become more and more bold, acting as little more than enforcers or thugs under the direction and protection of the Biden administration. I mean, how many examples do we need to see before we admit just how deep the corruption is in these federal institutions? How many conservative organizations does the IRS need to go after? How many innocent people need to be railroaded into prison based on fabricated or missing evidence? I recently did a story on a former FBI agent who's pled guilty now to destroying evidence against an Arkansas state senator, evidence which was likely exculpatory. Former FBI agent Robert Cesario knowingly, willfully, and intentionally violated a court order to produce his laptop which contained evidence. Instead of producing that laptop, Cesario had the hard drive professionally wiped. Then he proceeded to wipe the hard drive again himself. Cesario admitted to doing this in his guilty plea. Why destroy evidence in a case that's being prosecuted unless that evidence is exculpatory? The Arkansas state senator in question, John Woods, He was sentenced, by the way, to over 18 years in prison. Is he guilty? I don't know. Neither do you. Neither does anybody else. Why? Because an FBI agent knowingly destroyed evidence that could be exculpatory. Earlier this month, in an unprecedented move, FBI agents raided Mar-a-Lago, home to former President Donald Trump. Now, the reason for this unprecedented raid on a former president's home? Well, he may have had some classified documents. Never mind that Donald Trump's attorneys have been working with the National Archives for months to return some documents which may or may not have been classified. And never mind that no former president in history has had their private home raided by federal law enforcement over something as inconsequential as potentially having documents that the National Archives wants. There is a 0% chance this raid was not political. There is also a 0% chance that the Biden administration at some level was not involved. Do you want to talk about fascism in America? You want to talk about an authoritarian government violating the rights of its people? Enter Joe Biden. President or banana republic dictator? You tell me. The mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, publicly funded NPR, which, by the way, is funded with your tax dollars, as well as big social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook, pushing out fluff pieces complimentary to the regime while limiting access to information that goes against the will of their political masters. In an interview with Joe Rogan, Facebook founder and Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg openly admitted to suppressing the Hunter Biden story on advice from the FBI. And that was in the weeks leading up to the 2020 presidential election. In a recent poll, an astonishing 79% of Americans believed that the Hunter Biden story, if properly reported, would have changed the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. Let me say that one more time. 79% of Americans. 79% of Americans is not just MAGA Republicans, folks. 79% of Americans, that includes independents, and that includes a hell of a lot of Democrats. 79% of Americans believe the Hunter Biden story, if properly reported, would have changed the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. And earlier this year, a Rasmussen poll showed that 2/3 of American voters say that the laptop from hell story is important and that Joe Biden was likely involved in his son's illegal business dealings. Well, maybe the American people aren't as stupid as the left like to think they are. Looking at the FBI's conduct regarding the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, any reasonable person must conclude that they engaged in election interference. Federal law enforcement knowingly, willfully, with premeditation, conspired against the sitting president of the United States to prevent him from being elected. To prevent him from being elected in favor of their guy. The big guy, Joe Biden. Funny, isn't it? I mean, that sounds like the kind of thing the left accuses Donald Trump of doing, yet it's the Democrats who are the ones behind the scenes pulling the strings. The Democrats are the ones guilty of doing exactly what they accuse Donald Trump of doing. After all, the FBI has had Hunter Biden's laptop since December of 2019. They haven't investigated it. Why hasn't Hunter Biden been raided? For that matter, why wasn't Hillary Clinton prosecuted for illegally keeping over 30,000 emails, many of which were classified or top secret, on a private server, or for having her aides destroy cell phones and laptops containing evidence? Why? Because in a fascist state, the rules don't apply to the ruling elite. In a fascist state, you don't cross your political masters. In a fascist state, the party is protected by cronies who will obfuscate the truth while framing the enemies of the party. As I was finishing this episode, it came to my attention that Joe Biden has just announced his intent to appoint MSNBC analyst Jeremy Bash to the President's Intelligence Advisory Board. I'm sure that's because of his stellar qualification and has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that Bash insisted that the Hunter Biden laptop story was nothing but Russian disinformation. Welcome to Joe Biden's America. Welcome to fascism. That's my take. What's your take? You can let me know your take in the comments below. You can also let me know your take by joining the cult at Pol Pop Cult on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Rumble, and Truth Social. Thank you for listening.